Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed the workshops. It's great to feel the energy out there. You really are embracing the networking, which is wonderful. We'll give you plenty of additional opportunities to do that later in the day. But thanks so much for getting yourself back here for this exciting panel that we have next up. The panel is going to be led by Andrew Jack from the Financial Times Global Education Editor. He's been really a big influencer, shaper, commentator on the world of business and management schools, and we're really excited to have Andrew with us today to moderate this panel for us with regards to SDG learners in the digital era. So particularly excited about that. I'm also excited to have this amazing numbers of participation that we have. We have registered physically for the event 350 people, and importantly, an additional 700 registered online. So we've got over 1,000 people. Well done, Prime Community and the team that's been organizing this. Fantastic, and hopefully that will give us an extensive network. But with that, no further ado, let me turn it over to Andrew.
Thanks very much indeed, and great to see everyone here. So we've only got a little bit over half an hour with a huge and ambitious topic, but broadly framed around the issue of digital transformation and learning through the framework of the SDGs and the Prime objectives. A great panel here. We've got Chris Purifoy, CEO and co-founder at Learning Economy Foundation, Betina Szkudlarek as Deputy Dean for Research at the University of Sydney Business School, Bruno Roche, founder of the Economics of Mutuality Foundation, and Halla Tómasdóttir, the CEO and Chief Change Catalyst at the B Team. So we're going to talk a little bit about the transformative influence of technology, and we're going to discuss in a little bit the implications for research and teaching within business schools. But I think we should start by kind of thinking about those wider technological transformations that are taking place and what that's doing to and what the needs are of business as the key stakeholder, in a sense, interacting with business schools, if business schools are to continue to have a meaningful future in this rapidly changing world. So maybe let me start with you, Chris, just to frame a little bit how transformational and what forms of digital transformation are we seeing, and what's that going to do to the world of business, the world of work, and actually human existence, really?
Yeah, so easy one.
Yeah.
We've seen quite a bit of digital disruption in the past few years. Starting with maybe in 2020 when we saw the virtualization become a real important moment in history with education. But really, as we find ourselves today, there's a common topic everyone is chatting about: AI, right? And it's impossible to talk about what the future will look like in general as a civilization, but definitely within the realm of education and business, without actually having a come to Jesus about AI, right? It's a very interesting time, and I'd like to liken it to what I call manifestation technology that's coming our way, right? It's an interesting term, maybe it's a little radical, but when you look at the last 100 years, largely it's marked by information technologies, really, starting with the printing press to the computer to the internet. How do we create information? How do we distribute it? How do we access it? How do we share it? And this has really led to many moments like this, where we come to a kind of a crossroads in education and other places, and we say, wait, how's the calculator going to change how we teach math? So what's going to happen with the computer, the internet? The internet now how is Wikipedia going to change things? And we've had to kind of hit each one of these and make decisions of how we'll change and how we'll reform our education and our processes as humans. But this one is particularly interesting, right? Because now we find ourselves in a new mode where, and I like to think of it as manifestation technology, because now we can just say a word or a sentence and we can receive all of this amazing input, right? I mean, we saw digital art kind of completely change. And if you're a digital artist, like I'm so sorry for you today. We see this happening with texts now, with documents, with information. It's it's a year away from music probably. It's a year and a half away from movies and Hollywood having to change. So this is a really interesting moment. And when you think about it through the lens of education and through the lens of business, what's the change here? There's kind of a step function change that the internet brought about, where you used to need to be an expert, you needed to learn the knowledge and then apply the knowledge. And when the internet came along, the ability to get the knowledge was rapidly increased. So now I can go to the internet, and there's been lots of conversations, how does this affect the youth, that they can just like get facts immediately, and they don't need to know facts, they can just have them on demand on their phone. But then they were still required to go and apply that, right? And so through the application of that information, they were still able to learn. And anyone that, in business, you can do everything, you can learn everything, and then when you start your own business, anyone that's done it knows that you learn again and while you fly the plane. And so the application process in many ways is the best way to learn. And there's a moment now where with generative AI, the application of that information is also kind of being disrupted. Now I can ask for something, it can give me the facts, it can also give me the document, it can give me, I can get a term sheet, I can get a proposal, I can get, a PDF of anything I want, and I can have this created in a matter of seconds. How does this change things? And I think that there's a real moment now where we have to look where it used to be the expert won, and the generalists kind of came in second, and I think we're moving into a new phase here where the generalist wins the day, and the experts become a little bit less relevant because these AI models become the experts. And if we can really quickly apply that information, I think there are perils, but there's also incredible advantages.
And we're going to come back a little bit on the pedagogy in a minute, but Halla first. I mean, with the B team, you're engaged a lot with organizations, companies that are at least in principle sort of high level, embracing a lot of issues of societal values that we're discussing here at the forum. But how, when you're engaging with them, are you feeling the disruptive impact of technology on that? Where do they feel the agenda is moving?
Yeah, this is a really interesting moment. I would frame it up as we're at the cusp of creating the world we want and need, but we're also at the cusp of what could be terrible outcomes from existential opportunities, but also threats. And I would put climate there alongside with AI. AI could help us solve that. Nature loss, I would actually want to talk about unsustainable levels of inequality within our societies and between countries within the globe, a social contract that's very fragile. Rollbacks in rights and democracies are happening. And so never has it been more difficult to be a leader. And where we go from here, which cusp it is, the best world we have yet seen, or the terrible world that we could be heading towards, comes down to one thing, in my view, and the view of the B team, and that's who we choose to be as leaders at this time. And while I see the opportunities of AI, and I spent yesterday with lots of CEOs who were rolling around in those opportunities and sharing amazing possibilities and opportunities this offers, I have a deep concern as a mother, as a human, whether we are actually seeing this moment as AI in service of humanity's future, helping us solve climate change, nature loss, all of that. And so I think this is existential for any business and any business school or management school out there to think about how to meet this moment. And it is my view that we need to teach people AI and data literacy. We need to teach them climate competency, but more important now than ever, we need to help people be the leaders we now need. And to me, that starts with a moral compass or an inner compass, true purpose and principles at the heart of what we do. And I wish I could say that I feel like what's happening now with this AI disruption, which is just another black swan that's come our way. We've had so many in the recent years, and we will have so many more, that I don't see that anybody can be a business leader or leader of any walk of life, because I think there's a leader inside of each of us, without having that inner compass guiding this journey forward. And unfortunately, I don't see great bravery from our governments to act fast enough. So I really think it's going to come down to us showing up and thinking about the principles. I mean, when nuclear came about, that was also a technological disruption. We agreed that we needed an agreement around that. And yet I don't see a global agreement about the principles that are going to guide us as we face the AI disruption, as we face the climate disruptions that are already here, nature loss, inequality, broken democracies, and so on and so forth. So I just would say to anyone in business school, double down on dropping from the head to the heart, because GPT may very well replace a lot of our knowledge and give us access to a lot more, which is great for potential. But it is so far from having an inner compass in terms of the world that it will create. It's far from it. And as a matter of fact, most people I speak to, including about 40 CEOs yesterday, they don't agree on how long it will take, but they talk about anywhere between 6 months and 2 years before they're smarter than us and they basically run the world. And is that what we want? I think we should make a conscious decision about that. And that is going to come down to all of us and who we choose to be.
So Betina, maybe just first from a perspective within a business school, the only one actually on the panel currently in faculty, I guess. I mean, how much are you seeing both the strategic responsiveness, the concern, the opportunities from faculty as well as students to leverage and use these newer technologies?
I think it's a great question, and I think as faculty we are still more in the stage of fearing it replacing us than in the stage of what's our newly found place in actually leading the change, the direction that Halla just described. So I think the questions that you ask yourself, whatever unit you are teaching, whatever research you are working on, is how you're going to contribute not to create a little bit more knowledge, but to actually transform individuals so that we have this leadership capacity to create the good, not the bad future that was just presented in front of us. And I think, I started teaching a leadership unit a few years ago, and I opened several textbooks, desperate to find a good one. And I was taken, by surprise to realize that all the textbook went from comparing one leadership style to another, with absolutely no transformational impact to be generated. So I think that's what each of us needs to rethink. What do we really teach? Do we put in true knowledge, or do we create the transformative experience that our leaders will go out there knowing they are the agents of change? Because as we said, we will be replaced very quickly if it's only about knowledge. It's a bit like going to listening to a concert. You can have the best audio equipment in the house, but it's the concert experience that leaves you with that deep transformative feeling. And that's the education we need to create, the one where it's not about listening to a CD-ROM or something else from the past, but that creates that driven, passionate, transformative experience for our students.
And so that's the high-level vision. What about in practice? How much is it starting to penetrate, shake the walls, be used for good or bad by students and faculty that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think as faculty we are very narrowly still focusing on our classrooms and the impact we create with the small group of students, which is great. 70 million, not such a small group of students. It's massive actually, but I think we can do much more. And I think if we embrace the digital transformation, how many of you go out there and use LinkedIn or Twitter to spread the message? Are you encouraging your students to be the transformative force? For example, we revised one of the assessment formats. Rather than just be an internal essay that students write for us, they create, which is a very big term, I know, a thought leadership piece. It's a short, brief piece about whatever is the topic of research they have done. So it's based on evidence and not just random thoughts. And they have to make it catchy and interesting and share it on their LinkedIn profiles to create new type of social media footprint that is meaningful and evidence-based and informative, and is putting out there the word to others, their peers and their potential future employers. So I think we have to move the way we think and how we use technology as educators to expand the impact, the positive impact that we can have.
So we'll come back perhaps into some of those ideas around dissemination and research, but Bruno, maybe switching to you. So what's your take on this? I mean, how far are business schools meaningfully responding? Is their agenda advancing sufficiently?
Well, and a few years ago, I was truly convinced that actually management education is probably one of the most powerful levers to change the world. And actually, the figure that you shared with us this morning, like 70 million people actually are being graduated. I mean, a third of all the graduate students graduate with a business school or equipped at a diploma. To some extent, you could say, well, it's crazy because we don't need as many business people in the world. Maybe we need more doctors, scientists, sociologists, but it is what it is, right? So in a sense, targeting the business schools is actually a number one priority. But the second thing is that nowadays, especially with the advent of this new technology, and which actually is going to disrupt the world, and not only the world, but also the way we teach, as I was reflecting, I was quoting a couple of very old quotes actually. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. So in a sense, you see this disruption technology has always been part of the history of humankind, right? And it's essentially, it is moving up the needle about what we need essentially to make a difference in the world. And maybe we don't need anymore to have access to knowledge, because actually the internet is going to do that. Maybe we don't need to spend too much time on actually being an expert in applying certain knowledge. But there are some things which will remain, and actually it's all about the purpose of what we're doing, right? Why are we doing this? Is it actually to make a better world, or just to replace humankind by machine? And I think in a sense it is something that business schools should really, or management school should really take as a #1 priority. And there is another quote which I very much like, actually. I'm going to paraphrase it. It's what Einstein said. He said, "Science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind." You could actually easily paraphrase it to say, well, science or technology without values is lame, right? And values without technology is blind. So in a sense, this combination of values and technology is, in my view, the #1 priority. Now, having said that, it is education cannot do this alone, right? And education is only one stakeholder out of many. And I came to the conclusion after spending 15 years on this field is that business and business world will not reform itself. And they may claim they want to reform, but eventually the incentive is too strong to keep the status quo. And there will be a need to have external pressure. And it could very well come from a catastrophic event from nature, or like a catastrophic event from a social unrest or a war. This we can't control, but I think there are two levers that we can control. The first one is regulation. And I think actually what we have seen over the last 5 years, especially with COVID, is that government is back. I know it's not something that the Anglo-Saxon world likes to think about, but I can really tell you, if you ask the young people, especially the millennials and the Gen Z, they have more trust in government than business. It's a fundamental shift. And these people actually, they have seen how corporate world behave during crisis. They put more trust in government. So government is actually going to regulate. And that's actually taking a big part of the agenda. But the other actually big lever, in my view, is really about management education. And in a sense, you could argue that in the ideal world, the business schools or the management schools should take the lead in defining the agenda. To some extent, I know it's a broad generalization, but to some extent, my observation is that the business schools is lagging behind. So I think there is an opportunity now, especially with this advent of new technology, to leapfrog actually, and to have a real intentional agenda to teach courage, to teach purpose, to teach responsibility, because this actually is not something that ChatGPT or AI will replace. And essentially it's moving the needle into a higher place of humanity if we catch up this opportunity.
But Chris, I mean, is this technological advance out of control? Is it actually going to be values free, or is there a way to channel it in a way that can reflect some of the values and ethics that Bruno was reflecting?
Yeah, so you got a lot of really easy questions. Yeah, I mean, I think there's nuance to all of this. I mean, I do think that there will be government regulations that are going to be coming down in Europe, likely. The United States is going to have a really hard time doing that. Just
China also.
China also. But to be honest, those regulations, in my opinion, are going to fall flat. Only because these technologies, you can regulate the major platforms, but you can't regulate the open source. You can't regulate things that are happening on individual systems and basements, and the advances in that are actually just as fast. You know, I just read a study yesterday that, you know, some of these new models like Orca, which are open source and readily available and can be run on a single computer, are outperforming GPT-4 in some places. And that's just where we are now. So, but I mean, I don't want to speak all doom into it. You know, I think that it's uncertain. You know, they call it a singularity because we don't know what happens next, and I think we find ourselves living in that moment. But I do think there is a future where this is really great as well. You know, and I think a lot of it comes down to how we rethink data, right? I mean, we spend a lot of time in our organization looking at how do you responsibly use data. You know, I think the moment at hand here for an individual learner to be able to have a learning and employment record that represents who they are as a learner, it represents everything they've learned, all, you know, informal and formal through the life of their learning, both in K through 12 and higher education and online, and being able to apply that into a system where they have control over that and they have consent over that information, but that information can be used to personalize their learning. I think this is really amazing. You know, this is what we as educators have been talking about as the holy grail for education for decades. And we always let's try our best to do personalized learning, but it's really, really hard. And I think there is a moment now with, you know, the advent of digital wallets and learning and employment records and artificial intelligence to apply that in a learning context where it just radically makes things amazing. It also obviously comes with challenges like every other existential threat, or existential moment in history. But this is an exciting moment, I think, because as we started to apply these technologies in our organization and look at, you know, we're kind of an R&D org, so we applied a lot of these AI models and said, how would they be used? And I started using them, and I was just myself like, wow, like what an unbelievable world it would have been if I had had this. And you start thinking about it from an equity perspective, you know, people being able to get access to tools that can help them understand their skills and help them understand, you know, quick ways. You can say, here are my goals, and you can say, here are eight things you can do right now to apply that. Here are the other prerequisites, and, you know, practicing job interviews and practicing skills and getting immediate assessment feedback to say, here's how it works and here's how it can be better. And all of those tools can be applied around who I am as a learner and what I know and what I don't know. I mean, it's all very, you know, kind of turbulent when you think about it because it represents a massive shift. But I think there is an opportunity, if regulated, as you say, and if you put values inside of this, and if you put a responsibility layer on top of this, that it could be remarkable, you know? And I think that the idea here isn't that AI is going to take our jobs. I think it's people that use AI will take our jobs, and that's an unfortunate truth, but I think that is a truth.
And Halla, Bruno had mentioned this suggestion that young people are placing greater faith again in government, although actually I've seen some alternative, you know, interpretations. Actually, business has had greater confidence in the government, and of course, in many ways, the tech companies have created the conditions to undermine faith or confidence in government, haven't they, through the creation of these social networks that can be manipulated, as we've seen here, for example, certain well-known social networks to, you know, stoke populism and extremism and fabrication of information. So do you think, you know, business can actually be, or is proving sufficient of a force of good, of reining in some of those excesses or taking more seriously its responsibilities?
I think that othering, pointing fingers at someone else and not facing the mirror yourself is the cancer in society. So I'm not going to say here business can solve it or government can solve it or activists or citizens or next generation will solve it. I'm just going to say we need to all show up and be the leaders that decide that the cusp we are on is to create the world we want. And everybody has a role in that. Government needs to write the rules for it to work. Like, is there going to be a tax on the use of information that basically has been extracted from all of us, but nobody's paid us for it, but some companies are making enormous profit from it? I could name probably 100 other questions like that, but government has a role to write the rules and align the incentives with the future we need and not the past that we're trying to move from. And I can just name one fact: $1.8 trillion every year go into environmentally harmful subsidies. We subsidize our own demise, and then we go to all these conferences and talk about setting goals about net zero and nature positive future. So there's all kinds of things that government has a role to write. Business has to use its entrepreneurial capacity and the fact that, yes, employees trust their employer the most. That's the highest trust parameter in the world today. So employers need to think about not just the fact that they can increase efficiency by 30%, which is what the CEO of Salesforce told me last night they've done already with AI. 30% increase in efficiency is significant in a couple of months. They need to think about, how are they helping and supporting people to then use their talents for creative, communicative, collaborative efforts to solve the world problems, as Mark Benioff certainly does a lot of, and more than many businesses and B team leaders overall. And citizens, each and every one of us has a big role to hold governments and business to account. So I think the new leadership playbook is about three things, primarily. radical collaboration between all those actors to show up for this poly-crisis moment, or whatever we want to call this existential moment humanity is in. Radical inclusion, because we cannot solve problems that are hurting people that don't even see them or are never at the table. We still have male, pale, and stale boardrooms, I'm sorry to say, but the crisis of conformity is well alive in every boardroom of big business in the world and in our governments as well. And radical transparency, because if we're gonna be naked, and yes, you guys, we are naked now, we better look good. And so I just wanna, this is the new leadership playbook in my view, and radical humanity from all of us is gonna activate that playbook. So yeah, we're all naked now, so we better look good. No secrets anymore in this world.
So in our final section, let's just think a little bit about the practical applications within business education. So Betina, maybe a bit, so how can we engage more both, you know, students reflecting on and using with faculty technology to prepare them for a more positive and societally useful skill set, value set?
Yeah, I think it's, again, a great question, because I think it starts with us and embracing that technology in the first place. And I think we need to be on top of that. We need to know everything about it and learn to use it ourselves. And I think most of us still really fear even touching it. And I'm sure the fear is also, what if, you know, someone finds out that I actually even downloaded it or opened it? So I think that fear is, I sense in the corridors of my institution. Well, in fact, we should embrace and learn to work with it, because the businesses already do. I think the second really important role for us is again, making sure that if we want that better world, we need to make our students realize how privileged they are and how privileged we are. And I don't think that many of them are aware of that. I think the notion of privilege is very much detached from their reality. And that's the transformative experience that we need to give. It comes not from a place of, I am here, the good Samaritan trying to save you, but it's really about understanding the very core of what privilege is, and the fact that I have now done nothing to deserve to be here today, really, beyond being lucky to be born at a certain time in a certain place. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have worked hard, but someone else working probably much harder in a different part of the world will never, ever get a chance to experience 5% of the privilege I do. Mm. And unless students understand that, it's very difficult for them to solve those big problems, because they solve them from, again, the perspective of privilege and superiority, which, as I'm saying, I believe I haven't deserved. And therefore, I hope that, you know, my students also understand that notion. So I think, yeah, that's the transformative experience I hope we can give beyond everything else that ChatGPT can't do that yet, but maybe we'll be able to do soon.
Chris, from your perspective, what are some of the tools that could be used more effectively within education and business schools in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to a little bit of my previous statement. I think that, you know, when I look so if I were to imagine a world that was solving a lot of big problems with technology, it would look like this. It's a world where learners and workers are given digital wallets, if you will. It's a terrible term, but, you know, are given the ability to have their learning and employment records that they can control and they can have access to, which represent everything they've done, you know, that can have, you know, that can then be consented to and applied into systems like my school. So when I arrive, the big problem you have when learners leave a school or a university or a job is we don't know what happened to them. And so because we don't know what happens next, we don't actually know, was their impact, was, you know, were skills created, did they go on to have jobs and abundance and happiness? What I would like to do is flatten that so that we know who the learners are, we know what they're doing, or at least they do themselves, and they can come into a school, they can consent to having that information shared with their teachers so the teachers can have a personalized experience with them. They can have ownership of their own data that can be applied to AI tutors who can help to personalize the education for them so they can, you know, learn what they need to learn and practice what they need to practice so they're more empowered in the future. And I also think that there's a moment where, you know, we hopefully, you know, as humanity have a moment where we can step back a little bit and actually do less of the tedious things and be more focused on what we really love to do. Like, imagine a teacher who doesn't have to worry about all the logistics anymore and can really just focus on being one-on-one with an individual and helping empower them. Or an individual who doesn't have to do all the tedious work in their job and the research and the things, and instead they can go straight to the impact. And so my hope is that these technologies can help us augment what we're doing in a way that leads us straight to impact and kind of skips the minutia of, you know, what happens in between, which, and as you see, a lot of people never make it to the impact. They get stuck or lost in the minutia of the day-to-day, and they never make it there. So hopefully it can be a catalyst towards, real impact and change.
Bruno, what do you see? Do we need to regulate or double down on these technologies?
Well, I'd like to go back to what I said. There is nothing new under the sun. It's not the first time, actually, humanity is facing a technological shift. But two principles remain, in my view. The first one is that people perish because of lack of education. And the love of money is a source of all kinds of evil. These two principles, actually, if you enact them, they can actually cut across any time of technology. Of course, we are at the moment where we can see, actually, that this transformation of the way we work, the way we think, the way we access knowledge, the way we access also even the not only knowledge but also expertise, as you said, is changing. But nevertheless, I mean, these two principles remains. And actually, you introduced me as someone actually who thought about this concept of mutuality. And mutuality is a very interesting concept actually, because you see, human beings, we need other people to do what we do. You can never do something on your own, right? Have you ever tried to do something on your own? Good luck, right? You need other people. You need other people to know who you are. You are who you are in the eyes of the other people. So actually, I prefer to look at people I love and I trust to know who I am. I don't want to look into a machine to know who I am. All right? So this notion of individual relationship will remain. But mutuality is all about actually establishing functional relationship. You can have different type of relationship. You can have abusive relationship. You can have power relationship. You can have submissive relationship, right? But in a sense, my research and the research we've done over the last 15 years should actually that mutual relationship. So in a sense, in honoring the other party, actually trying to establish win-win relationship is actually, in the short run, it's not very easy, because actually power is actually a very, very effective way to do things, right? To make things done. But it is a suboptimum type of relationship. And our research have shown that actually if you apply mutuality or reciprocity or Hu-Wei in China, it's actually a way to achieve a higher level, not only of value creation, but also of well-being. And this actually is a principle I believe will remain, even if we are dealing with AI and machines that want to replace the way we think, the way we behave, the way we love, the way we know who we are.
So Halla, just a final comment, because we're running out of time, but very simple question then. So what should, in the eyes of the B-team style companies, business schools be doing more? And what, on the other hand, should the companies be delivering? Or indeed, is the relationship breaking down and we'll see even less symbiotic link between management education and business in the future?
I think we're absolutely clear on the fact that we need to break down the silos within schools and between the private sector and the educational institutions and governments. I mean, it's about radically collaboratively to meet these challenges. But I was lucky enough to be a co-founder of a new university in my home country, Iceland, long time, 25 years ago, and we doubled down on entrepreneurship, which at the time served my country well. Today, the president of that school who I worked with said if she was choosing today, it would be sustainability, and probably some people would add data competency as another sort of skill set. But if I was to found a new school today, and I'm hoping, looking at all of you, that you will take it to heart, because I don't have time to also do that with my job. So I would look at all of you to do this with me. I would found the School of Courage and Humility. I would go 10 times bolder in teaching courage, lots of different experiential ways across all faculties and together, and then humility, because it's a foundational element to being able to lead in a collaborative way in this world that is so broken and has so low trust, to know that you do nothing alone. But we are at the cusp of creating a world where all of us can love where we live and work. We have the technologies to do it. We have the money, we choose to direct it in our own demise at times. It is the human science of dropping from our head to our heart that we need to teach every single person at whatever age to do now. And the humility to know that nothing great ever happens by going it alone. So capitalism with care can be ours. The Nordic countries have modeled it. Mette is a Nordic sister of mine, I think. And the well-being, the health of the economy and of our people is higher than anywhere else. So I'm not giving up on capitalism, even if a lot of our business school students have. but we have to rethink it to be in service of humans and our shared home. And so courage and humility would be the two qualities I would try to teach every student, no matter what age.
So a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much. We could go on much longer, but I think now thoughts are turning to food. So we will now move to back up. But thanks very much indeed to our panel.
Thank you all.